I could introduce you as my favorite guest ever, but problem is there's been a lot of guests who'd be very upset with that, especially the ones who I've privately told were my favorite guests ever. You know how that goes. So I'm not gonna.
Once we're rolling, once we're on the air, we'll just do it really formally. Like we'll just do it like really like straight up.
Like a script, that whole thing.
We'll just be like, you be Walter Cronkite.
But I said you need no introduction. I think that's true. So I waited till this morning. They sent me the advance thing so I could be one of the cool people who listened to Ultra on Friday, and I went, no, I'm gonna be with the people who can start Monday morning.
Thank you, because what you would have been sent on Friday was a rough draft, and it went through like 6 more drafts between Friday and this morning when we finally posted it. Yeah.
So I have spent a significant amount of my amateur scholarship in the 1940s. 1944 especially, but 1940 because it's Franklin Roosevelt running. He's the first guy who decides to run for a third term as president, right? So that's kind of what 1940 is to me, and it's the ramp up to our involvement in World War II, which is already underway. World War II is underway. We're not in yet. I had no idea about anything that's in this 1940 story that you're telling, including this United States senator I'd never heard of.
Yes.
And there aren't that many of them. You should be able to know. And
it was the worst civilian plane crash in U.S. history when it happened. I mean, not only was it a plane crash that killed a serving U.S. senator and a lot of other interesting people on board the plane, which is part of what episode 1 is about, but there had never been a deadlier civilian crash before that plane crash, and it's just totally lost to history.
And yeah, I did know about the plane crash. Senator goes down in a plane crash. And, oh, by the way, there's 2 FBI agents on board and a federal prosecutor, and there might have been a fight, and it's a stunning. This is the story you begin with in the podcast, and so you're just in it. You know what? Let's listen to. I want to listen to.
Oh, you pulled sound from it.
I want to listen
to
the way you begin this thing, okay? Because this thing grabs you and absolutely doesn't let you go. Let's just listen to the very beginning of this.
Okay.
Today, Saturday, August the 31st.
It's Saturday, August 31st, 1940. Senator Lundin gets to work early that day, even before his secretary arrives. When she gets in, she finds him already there, already at his desk. But something is definitely wrong. He's not sitting at his desk like usual. He's slumped there. He's got his head down on his desk. His head is buried in his arms. He doesn't appear to be sick, though. What he appears to be is emotionally distraught. He's crying. The secretary asks him what's wrong. He won't explain. He's got tears streaming down his face, but all he'll say to her is, "I can't talk about it. And I've gone too far to turn back."
So, I worked in the United States Senate. Here's a line I never heard from a senator. "I've gone too far to turn back." So this is 50 seconds into this podcast.
Yeah.
And Lawrence Donald Jr. has gone too far to turn back. And so I don't move.
Kind.
I don't move for the rest of that one, and then bang, the second one starts immediately. But as I said to you at the beginning of the hour, I still don't know why it's called Ultra. Am I not to know? Should I wait?
No, it's not a big reveal.
Is there a cool reveal to the title?
Ultra is. There may be a second season of Ultra, which is in part why it's got a title that is not super specific to this plot.
Here's the thing about the second season. I personally am going to need it to start right away. Okay. I cannot do this waiting thing. Okay.
Well, it's not like it goes on forever. It's a mini series. There's only 8 episodes for the first season. We've put out 2 of them already. And the idea of Ultra is that that's a term that is used in other countries more readily than it is used here, often to mean ultra-nationalists or people who are ultra-hardline in some way. We don't really use it in politics here. Although people have started to. In the Trump universe, there's sort of an ultra-MAGA idea, which has started when I think I'm speaking to that a little bit. But it's basically the idea of politics being not just extreme, not just radical, but being something that is a compounding element of willingness to use violence. And so, again, it's a concept that is more familiar in other countries in terms of their political science. It's also sometimes used to talk about soccer hooligans. And radical proto-fascist soccer hooligan movements in other countries. That's some of the way that it gets used. And I don't think actually that's too far off from what I'm talking about here. So it is a little bit of an impressionistic thing, but it's basically about the ultra-right and politics getting more than just extreme, politics becoming something where politics is abandoned and you're willing to be violent.
And you have reached back and found in the thick of the forest of our politics of the 1940 era a predecessor to the kind of insurrectionist activity that we have been living with.
And I think that it is easy for us in our personality-driven politics today to look for precedent in character, to look for who was the Trump or who was the John Eastman or who was the Michael Flynn. And you can find those parallels in individual humans. I think it is more interesting and maybe more useful for us to find parallel movements, parallel impulses, parallel moments of extremism, and people being willing to abandon the democratic experiment. And we really did have that in a way that has a lot of resonance with today in the late 30s leading into the start of World War II. And there was a real crisis around violent seditionist movements that were well armed, that were planning violent attacks on the U.S. government to install authoritarian dictatorships here. And in some cases, they were supported by the Hitler government. There were also members of Congress who were helping. And the really interesting the really interesting moment for me in the story, the reason I decided this had to be a podcast was when I realized that the involvement of members of Congress in this plot is what effectively foiled the Justice Department's abilities to address it. We are very bad at using the criminal justice system to bring people with a lot of political power to account because they use their political power to pressure the justice system. It's not supposed to be that way, but we see it. And this is a clear example of that. Members of Congress who were implicated threw their weight around to get the investigation derailed. And we ought to know that history. The Justice Department ought to contend with it, but we ought to know. So we're not looking to the criminal justice system to do everything. It has to be a whole response.
And there's so much in the politics of the time that was feeding this, including what I think has been lost in the post-World War II, especially the post-World War II entertainment industry about World War II, the movie world of it. America was hugely opposed to getting involved in World War II, almost right up until the moment that we did. And that was part of what was being fed in this story.
Yeah. And you've got, we know the America First Committee, the America First Movement, which is amazing that somebody's today using America First as their slogan, given the history of them. But that was, the most prominent industrialist in the country, Henry Ford, the most prominent, the most famous person in the country who wasn't the president, Charles Lindbergh. It was some of the most prominent, both celebrities and industrialists in the country. The most powerful media figure in the country, Charles Coughlin, somebody whose influence has never been matched in modern days. All pulling in the isolationist direction, some of them with incredible radicalism and anti-Semitism attached to them. And that was the anti-interventionist movement. It wasn't some little splinter. It wasn't some little, some rump or obscure corner of American politics. They were the most powerful, prominent people in the country pulling in that direction. And their connections with the Hitler government and their connections with very dangerous and violent anti-Semitism is something that I don't think has been well told.
Yeah, there was an anti-World War II, anti-war sentiment that rationally grew out of World War I.
Yes.
And our experience there and people feeling very negative about our experience there. That's to be distinguished from this virulently anti-Semitic, very pro-Nazi Charles Lindbergh, the most famous leader of the American kind of pro-Nazi movement, decorated by Hitler himself. All these characters were getting these guys, this picture here, these guys with guns, was getting these guys excited to do what they do. In episode 2 of Ultra, which I listened to today. When do I get episode 3?
On Monday. You will get a new episode every Monday until we get to number 8.
I'm afraid this is Monday. So you're telling me, what am I supposed to do for the next... okay.
I will tell you that in episode 3, you are going to meet Senator Lundin's widow, Norma, who is herself a
heck of a story, and you will want to hear it.